Should I be making a joke about how ironic this stage's name is, or is that no longer funny? I have a general tendency to gloss over final boss fights and final stages in most of my videos, and I think it's mostly because by the time I get to the end game, I'm so burnt out because of all the details I went into that I end up just settling with a pretty generic sentence about whether or not I enjoyed how a game ended. In my Mario 64 retrospective, I had a fun little climactic highlight of the game as I went into the final Bowser throw. But for all intents and purposes, I don't actually think Bowser in the Sky and the final Bowser fight is mechanically all that climactic. Rainbow Ride and Tick-Tock Clock do a lot of the heavy lifting for Mario 64. I still love the way that game ends, but I don't think Mario 64's final stage and boss fights have the same commanding ending as something like Super Mario World even. Which is part of the reason I didn't feel it necessary to dedicate a whole segment of my Mario 64 retrospective for the endgame. I'm not going to imply that Sunshine's finale is the ultimate final 3D test, especially when you consider the final challenge stages that have come up at the end of the 3D Mario games starting from Galaxy 2 and onwards. But I do think Corona Mountain offers a lot to talk about, and is worth dedicating a whole section for. But watch this space because I'll be covering Galaxy in the not too distant future. I still need to play through the game and get footage, so it won't be immediate, but keep an eye out on the channel over the next few weeks. I'll have some filler stuff uploaded in the meantime. Also, I think this segment will set a good precedent for future videos where I can dedicate a small portion to the endgame and final boss fights, rather than trying to rush and squeeze it in with the conclusion where it'll get lost. But anyway, as far as Sunshine's endgame is concerned, the final stage and final 10 blue coins of this game involve you controlling a boat with Mario's nozzle, the same way you had to on the Lily Pad Shine, and if you bump into anything, you'll immediately lose a life. Blue coins and boat nozzle controls make up like 2 of the top 5 most unpopular complaints of this game, so I think it's not too much of a stretch for someone to think that the end of this game might actually be the final round of punches you need to persevere beyond. Add on to that the inclusion of more meme-worthy voice acting and literally Bowser in a hot tub. And, well, actually let's take a step back before I start glossing over too much. When a player grabs the 7th shine in all 7 stages, Shadow Mario will run off into a newly opened access point to Corona Mountain, and players will drop into a flooded Delfino Plaza. This technically happened in my playthrough when I only had 50 shines, but quickly entering and exiting Corona Mountain drained Delfino Plaza so that I could continue along on my journey to 120. It's easy enough to follow Shadow Mario into the cave and gain access to the stage of the final area. Can I just say, as simple of a compliment as this may sound like, the aesthetic alone of this mountain, or I guess volcano, is very much appreciated. They easily could have done away with a fire stage given that we didn't see all the usual settings we'd see in the Mushroom Kingdom, but I actually do appreciate that they gave us a fire and lava challenge to close off the game, especially when you consider that Mario 64 didn't provide that for the endgame. And beyond that, my goodness are they making you work through the platforming on the opening sequence of this stage. You have to hop through a series of platforms that you might have to spray to put out a fire and cool it down prior to jumping on, all the while being cognizant of the platforms that are nothing more than a spike trap as you hop along. There's a lot of quick thinking here, a lot of shifting between spraying and hover nozzles, and potentially a lot of screwing up and falling into the lava. I like how they increase the distance between the platforms and change up their arrangements as you advance. It keeps the challenge dynamic and forces you to adapt as you go through it. For me, this first portion of Corona Mountain is the culmination of all the platforming challenges you went through during the game, but I also think it's a lot easier than a lot of the secret challenges. Actually, I don't even think this challenge is necessarily that hard, like you'll probably lose a few lives as you figure it out, but it's not nearly as difficult as you'd expect for a final stage considering everything you just went through prior to this. And that's because I think this whole segment would have been better if players didn't have FLUDD. If the platforms were a bit closer together and players would have to time their platforming around the fire and spikes, it could have rather been seen as a culmination of all the floodless areas they'd have previously gone through. Instead, it's a mildly challenging set of platforms with obstacles in the way that most players should comfortably get by without breaking too much of a sweat, or at the very least, after sweating much less than they did in earlier areas. There's a single blue coin along the way to collect too, but the real challenge doesn't really kick in until you make it past this short section of platforms and have to jump on the little boat and spray your nozzle. So I don't think this boat is intuitive to control by any means, and I don't think there's an easy way to understand what exactly moving it the way you want to move it entails. In theory, a player should be able to just spray in the opposite direction they want to travel or turn, and that should be enough. It works a lot of the time, but the problem is there's little margin for error, because even the slightest bump into an obstacle will make you lose a life. Which means working a lot of the time isn't enough, it needs to always work. There are times where it seems like the physics don't properly respond the way you'd expect them to, and that could completely ruin your whole effort you just put in. That being said, if you do take your time and move slowly, it's entirely accomplishable, and even the blue coins can be collected if you have enough patience. I mean, considering each blue coin saves the game as you pick it up, it's also an option to sacrifice your life to grab one of the blue coins if you get desperate, and just start the challenge over and rinse and repeat. And honestly, some of the blue coins and stone pillars set up around there are really set up in an unfriendly manner, as if the game wants you to fail this task as many times as possible prior to getting through it. I don't think Corona is often discussed with terror and distaste because of the early platforming segment, nor do I think the boat in and of itself is usually spouted as the worst part of the game. But I think the use of the boat in order to collect the blue coins is something that's generally detested. And with good reason. I'm somewhat on the fence here. It could be deemed as bad control of a poor gimmick. This is Mario Sunshine after all. It would fit right in. But I also have that, let's call it hopelessly romantic since it's Valentine's Day opinion, that these endgame challenges should be hard. They should be painful, should be unfair, and should make you frustrated to accomplish, because this is the climax of the game. So I don't mind it all too much, but primarily because it's beatable. Like, yeah, they could have designed all this much better, but at the end of the day, when it comes to how I feel going through a final stage and getting pushed to the edge because the game is really putting my patience and sanity to the test, this boat area passes that with flying colors, especially when you're collecting the blue coins. Of course, at this point, the stage is still not over. You need to rocket nozzle your way up through the clouds, which is more of a spectacle than anything else. In order that you can access the entrance to the final boss fight. This is still so absurd to me. I live in a reality where Chris Pratt and Jack Black are voicing these two on the big screen, yet somehow this cutscene is a lot weirder to me than anything I saw in the Mario movie. And honestly, it's not even that awful. It's endearing when you consider this was their attempt at jumping into the 21st century with the next generation of consoles like everyone else did. It sort of feels like a weird and experimental part of Mario's franchise's history that was more or less shut down forever when it comes to the gaming sphere. Anyway, the cutscene ends and you're left with Bowser literally sitting in his goop-filled hot tub, ready to take you on, along with Junior floating around on a submarine, firing missiles at you. I'd say the biggest challenge here is just figuring out how to beat Bowser, since you don't actually attack him head on. You instead have to do these rocket-boosted ground pounds around the edge of the battlefield to win. Once you know what to do, it's only a matter of time. This shouldn't be challenging. So while I think Corona Mountain in and of itself provides a good amount of frustration and challenge to get through, especially if you're trying to grab the blue coins along the way, I think the boss fight itself is a little underwhelming, but it does provide a nice spectacle of Bowser and Junior fighting alongside each other in a hot tub. Which sounds a lot weirder saying out loud, but fits in with the context of the story. And with all of that said and done, our journey comes to a close. No more episodes, no more blue coins, no more anything really. In a lot of ways, it's anticlimactic, but at the same time, the whole game felt like it was too climactic. I mean, just think about everything we had to go through to get here. Everything we had to adapt to. Where was the downtime? Where was the moment you got to just chill and play out the game with comfort? That question might be answered differently depending on how you played the game, but just thinking from my own experience, I can't help but feel a sense of pride for all that I was able to learn to get to this point. And it makes me wonder if people even like to be put through a challenge anymore, because despite the fact that this game's whack setup is clearly a result of a rushed development cycle, that doesn't take away from the feeling of accomplishment I got every step of the way as I mastered the various obstacles thrown along my path. Mario's controls were tighter and took an hour to figure out, but I got there. FLUDD was stiff and doesn't have the most intuitive controls, but I got there. Secret challenges were spread all throughout the game, but I still was adamant to accomplish those. Surfing bloopers, sandbirds, manta rays, electrifying goop, and those dumb casino puzzles. I had to brush an eel's teeth. I had to let a bunch of piantas toss me around. Every one of these challenges was a new section of the game that I had to learn how to succeed in, but I succeeded. I never took my foot off the gas. Episode 8 shines, secret shines, 100 coin shines, blue coin shines, lily pads, watermelons, pachinko machines, Bowser balloons. Come on man, how can anyone finish this game and not feel like they're the kings or queens of this world? Mario Sunshine may very well be the worst of the 3D Mario games. It might have the least amount of polish. It might have the most cut corners. It might have an embarrassing amount of flaws that I will most certainly be discussing in the conclusion during the next segment. But I'll be damned if it's not easily the most rewarding 3D Mario game to beat. It was an ambitious title that faltered and stumbled in many ways, but it was made during a time where Nintendo was still trying extra hard to appeal to the hardcore gamers. All of these obstacles, whether intentional or otherwise, created a 3D Mario game that has kept me leaning forward, awake and aware through the entire adventure. And I don't think there will ever be another 3D Mario game that will annoyingly put me through the test the way Mario Sunshine did. I honestly don't even know where I'd rank Sunshine, but what I do know is that I'm exhausted, and I'm happy that I'm exhausted. This isn't your father's Mario. It's not even your son's Mario. This is your Mario. You, the player, that got this game on GameCube and mastered every aspect of it and spent the next 20 years saying it was the best 3D Mario title and defending all of these insane challenges. I have a lot of respect for you. Because while every Mario game may have a segment that'll put you through the ringer to prove that you're a true gamer and can accomplish anything, Sunshine lures you into this false sense of serenity on a vacation before it throws Mario into a jail cell, kicks you in the groin at the start of the adventure, and gives you a nosebleed at the end. And there is no other 3D Mario title that will ever be made that will make you feel like you climbed a mountain of COVID and came out the victor like Mario Sunshine did. And something about that makes me love this unpolished game more than I ever expected I would.